Hello everyone and welcome back to The Games Must Go On, a series where I ruin games in the only way I know how. Mario Galaxy is a platformer requiring the player to make leaps and bounds around planets to collect power stars, but I feel like Mario got it easy last time with the coinless challenge. So today we're taking it one step further and we're asking, can you beat Mario Galaxy without jumping? So without further ado, let's get right into the rules. The rules are simple. We're banning anything that would be considered a jump in Mario Odyssey, including jumps, double jumps, and of course triple jumps. However, this leaves us at a disadvantage because the game doesn't have Cappy, meaning I have no way to actually get height. This is except for two-player mode though, where we can use a second remote to make Mario bounce. While to some this may seem like a jump, in reality it's an external force making Mario gain vertical height, similar to Cappy and getting a vault in Mario Odyssey. And if you're feeling like this sounds too easy because of it, don't worry, I'm also limiting our spin to the two-player remote as well, which is definitely going to hurt. In this challenge, some moves may actually be controversial whether they're allowed or not, which is why I actually compiled a list of almost every move in the game to determine whether they are allowed or not. And here it is now. Now if you weren't able to get all that, don't worry, the entire list will be in the description below. And finally, I would just like to give a huge thank you to the Mario Galaxy genius Mayro for actually joining us today for this episode.
Alright, enough of the rules, let's get right into the run. Starting in the Gateway Galaxy, we find that with the second player remote, most of our moveset is granted to us, except with the addition of every jump, it's slightly more painful due to us actually being forced to point at Mario covered in green paint. But even with this challenge, this level is complete cakewalk and we can move on to Good Day Galaxy.
Star 1 here actually has a problem, and that's getting off this planet with the vine. While vines are in fact allowed because the manual describes using them as swinging, at first I was skeptical and tried to go without. However, doing a triple jump is probably one of the most difficult actions in this challenge, making the regular skip more difficult. So I decided to go with the obvious option and get a perfect long jump to give me enough momentum to fling myself off the very top of the vine instead. This led me to Dino Piranha, who is actually slightly more difficult because we can only attack him by spinning, an action that can only be done in midair. This makes our timing a little bit more precise in order to actually hit him. Nevertheless, it's still pretty easy and we're able to move on.
While Good Egg 2 was pretty easy, there was a little bit of trouble in Honey Hive 1, that being because of the bee mushroom. In order to fly with the bee mushroom, you have to be in midair to avoid jumping. This is easy enough if you're standing still because you can hold player 2's remote in one hand and player 1's in the other. However, this doesn't work when you need to move, in which case you have to switch players 2 remote with the nunchuck very quickly without jostling the remote enough to accidentally spin. There are some ways to get around this though, such as bouncing off an NPC like this bee here to stall in the air and get a little extra height. Nevertheless, Honey Hive 1 is in fact possible with careful movement.
After that, the rest of the terrace is actually pretty easy, only requiring a distance hover to get to the boss in Honey Hive 3. After beating the boss though, I made a terrible decision. I decided to socialize with someone. This person was none other than a Hungry Luma. And when you originally encounter Hungry Luma, it automatically begins its dialogue. However, after your first encounter with it, the Hungry Luma will only give you a dialogue prompt. This is a big deal because in Mario Odyssey, pressing A to initiate a dialogue prompt incremented the jump counter, and unfortunately we cannot trigger the dialogue while falling in this game like in Odyssey, so that trick won't work. This means I've essentially soft-locked that star.
The good news is that we're able to get to the fountain to get another 2 stars from Space Junk before finding some impossible stars. The first level is Rolling Greens, where we can't even get out of the first pen because player 2's remote did nothing when Luigi's on the star ball. The second level completely screws us over, Philip screwed to be exact because Battle Rock 1 requires us to screw in this bolt in order to turn on this moving platform. This is a problem because we can't spin on the ground. In order to spin, we have to press the A button in midair on player 2's remote.
Because Battle Rock 1 is impossible, none of the 7 Battle Rock stars are available. However, we can go back to Space Junk Galaxy and get Star Free and say hello to Comets. Our first stop on this list of comments we have to deal with is Good Egg Galaxy 4, and again, while vines are allowed, at this point swinging around a vine would be a sign of weakness, so we used another long jump instead.
After that, we can take down Space Junk 4, giving us the 15 stars needed to access Bowser's Star Reactor, which was easy enough. With the kitchen now open, we wanted to grab a couple of miscellaneous stars including Sling Pod Galaxy, Honey Hive 4, Hurry Scurry Galaxy, and Space Junk 6.
In the kitchen, we start off by breezing through Bubble Breeze Galaxy, doing an easy bounce to skip the launch star in Beach Bowl 1, and easily collecting Beach Bowl 2, 3, and 4 before getting stopped at Beach Bowl 6. This level reveals one of our greatest weaknesses in this challenge, Walljumps. Unlike most other moves that have a counterpart on the second remote, and Walljumps are not like this, only having a one-player option, and while they were allowed in Odyssey not incrementing the jump counter, I decided to ban them here, which of course makes this level impossible.
Unfortunately, Ghostly Galaxy is off the table as well because we can't shake with the Boom Mushroom. While there is a glitch to clip into the mansion without the Boom Mushroom, it's hard enough without the jump list restriction, so with our 25 stars, we're forced to move directly to Bowser Jr.'s Armada.
This level is surprisingly free, as long as we remember to stay on the ground when throwing shells. Which leads us to Drip Drop Galaxy where we have to throw shells underwater, which is allowed because we have a specific animation which obviously isn't spinning for it, but I decided to take precautions anyway, and just decided to ram into the eels instead, which actually worked out well. From there we finally get to the bedroom, starting off immediately with a problem in Gusty Garden Galaxy. Now just like the Star Ball, Luigi loses all connection with the Player 2 remote the second we grab onto one of these flowers. However, here there is in fact a solution. While you don't get enough distance by holding forward on the nunchuck, by holding backwards you actually surprisingly get more distance. That's because you're being pushed upwards by the wind. And this distance is so great that you don't need to spin. This leads to one more star being collected.
While this trick is good enough to get Star 1, that's about all it can do. Star 2's distance is much greater, making the trick unusable, and the level impossible. We can at least move to Freeze Flame Galaxy to get some more stars. While Star 1 is easy enough, Star 2 reminds us of our greatest weakness. Yep, Walljumps. However, we have a trick up our sleeves. We just have to jump right. If we go far enough right, we can fall into another gravity section, landing us right at the end of the level.
After that, Star 4 is possible without skating. However, we hit a wall in Star 3. Literally. In order to pass it, we have another screw that we are required to use. Now, we have 2 stars left before we can access Bowser, but we have a problem. Dusty Dune Galaxy's 7 stars are all unobtainable because of tornadoes at the beginning of Star 1, and Freeze Flame's secret star requires, of course, a wall jump. Or does it? Let me introduce you all to the 2-player wall kick. Now normally when you press A on player 2's remote while Luigi is sliding down a wall, nothing will happen. But what happens when you press A before Luigi is on the wall? Well, you do a spin that collides with the wall, and yeah, it gives us a tiny bit more height, but it's nowhere near enough to reach the top of this wall jumping section. But what happens if you press A again? Here's where the weird part. The game actually gives us a wall kick.
This technique does have 3 big asterisks though. For one, because this is a wall kick instead of a wall jump, you can't slide down the wall before pressing A second time after colliding your spin with the wall. For 2, the trick only works once. You can't chain wall kicks to get larger wall jump sections. And finally, probably worst of all, it's RNG dependent. That's right, every time you try this, you have a pretty slim chance at success. The important thing is though, it is in fact possible, even with the bumps in the way, allowing us to clear the level with 1 more star under our belt.
Now we only need 1 more star before we can move on, which goes to Buoy Base's secret star as it's relatively easy. But for the heck of it, I decided to check out the regular star as well, which was going pretty well until we got to the star chip section, where normally we would use a screw in order to activate the platforms to get a star chip inside of one of them. But we can't do that here for obvious reasons. Instead, what we can do is just take the rules of the universe as a suggestion and grab the star chip anyway by backflipping into it. Unfortunately, this is all in vain because at the very end of the level, there's a second screw we have to use in order to get to the star. The secret star, thankfully, is enough though to get to Bowser. So here we go. This level really isn't that bad, mostly because we're allowed to jump off poles because surprisingly enough in Mario Odyssey, pole jumps don't actually increment the jump counter. Now even though they are allowed, that didn't stop me from spending 2.5 hours trying to avoid it and failing. Trying everything from launching from multiple angles to trying to walk across the seam of a level. Nevertheless, pole jumps are allowed so we can destroy Bowser and move on to the engine room.
Starting off, the main 5 stars in Gold Leaf are a little difficult, requiring 2-player Wallkicks, but are all definitely possible. After that, both stars 1 and 4 in Sea Slide are possible. However, because of an NPC that requires an A press to activate, the rest of the stars here are impossible. We at least have one more level to grab stars from. Toy Time Galaxy. Star 1 starts by throwing a launch star in a cage at us, with the only way inside being to unscrew a bolt. That's at least the only way the developers intended you to get into the cage. However, speedrunners can actually clip inside by crouch spinning in a precise location. This of course comes with a catch. In order to do the trick, you actually have to spin while crouching on the ground, which we can't do. We still have one trick here though. By falling off the gravity panel and immediately spinning, we can get extremely close to the launch star, and with the perfect spin, we can actually clip inside to the launch star. Yo Nintendo devs, that's some pretty good programming you got there.
The good news now is that yes, that section was possible. The bad news is that this was the easy part. Welcome everyone to Mecha Bowser. The problem with this boss is that it's held together with screws. Screws that we can't make it past. Even on the boss's toes will get stuck because normally we would just screw down 2 bolts and use a sling star. But take a guess why we can't do that. At least the speedrun route goes up Bowser's left arm using a dozen wall jumps. And even if we somehow could do multiple wall jumps, it still wouldn't matter because Luigi isn't visible on camera, meaning we couldn't tap him with player 2's remote anyway. The only option now is to find a new strat to get up, and we don't have a lot to work with. The first trick that I tried involved just backflipping up to the next section of a level. However, due to gravity shifts and I believe an invisible wall, this route is impossible. My other idea involves some interesting geometry, this pipe to be specific. This route would not be easy. For one, we would have to find a way onto the pipe in the first place, and then because the pipe is technically a slope, we would have to find a way to BSJ with the 2-player remote. And remember, because the camera is below us, pointing straight up, it would be staring directly into the pipe, meaning Luigi isn't even in direct line of sight, which in turn means we can't even use the 2-player mode to BSJ. Nevertheless, with an extremely precise backflip and repeatedly pressing A, we can do a variety of super bounces and spins, moving us down the bar until we eventually, finally, make it all the way to the platform.
From here, all we have left is to make it past Bowser's arm, which has another bolt in it. It's pretty easy to bypass though. We just have to let gravity slide us up the arm, and from there we can flip up his head and get the star. From here, we can get the secret star with relative ease before skipping over star 2, because it requires either an enemy momentum launch or a mega side flip to get a star chip, and I'm okay without that in my life. We need 2 more stars, which are easy to get, those being one in Honey Climb Galaxy and the Fast Throw Comet in Toy Time. With 45 stars under our belt, we can go back and beat one of the first bosses in the game again to gain access to the garden.
Before we go, we can make a quick stop at the gate and grab the red star. But now in the garden, we can start in Deep Dark Galaxy, which switches things up with a switch. Now normally we can hit a switch by spinning in midair with the 2-player remote. But here we are underwater, so 2-player remote does nothing. The good news is we have access to a shell, which we can throw underwater. But can a shell activate a switch? Turns out the answer is yes, meaning we can make our way to another switch. At least a shell works on this one as well. After that, the boss requires a pole jump, but easily goes down. From there, the other 4 stars are relatively easy. You can even use 2-player Wallkicks to skip all the pole jumps in Star 2.
While the garden may look good now, it's about to get bad. Mana Splatter Galaxy is impossible because of a wall jumping section. Dreadnought Galaxy is impossible because of a wall jumping section. Molten Galaxy is impossible because of a— oh, actually this one's possible because of Lava Boost giving us stars 1 to 6. Surprisingly, we can even get quite far in star 2 until the lost jump, you know, because even with the perfect angle and max speed, we can't make it past this gap on the star ball, so yeah, it's not possible.
And that's it. We have collected 54 stars without any more accessible. So is the run finally dead? Well, not quite. It's finally time to learn how to socialize. Well, remember how we can't talk to NPCs because in Mario Odyssey initiating dialogue while on the ground increments the jump counter? In Mario Odyssey, that was circumvented by activating dialogue before landing in the midair. But that doesn't work in Galaxy because you have to land in order to get a dialogue prompt in the first place. But what if there was another way? What if instead of activating the dialogue before we landed, what if we activated the dialogue after we left the ground? While it is precise, we can do this.
Oh, so not only did you activate the dialogue, but you jumped as well.
Not quite. You see, the first thing that happens here is that I use player 2's remote in order to get a tiny bit of vertical height and some vertical speed. Then I go ahead and use player 1's remote in order to initiate the dialogue, noting that we are in fact off the ground because of player 2. After that, I continue through the text before closing the text box, resulting in what appears to be a jump. But this jump-shaped jump is not actually a jump, but instead a result of our original 2-player bounce. Now you remember how we got vertical speed from that bounce? Well, when we entered the text box, it actually paused at vertical speed. And after we finished the text box, that vertical speed was actually released, resulting in what appears to be a jump, but is actually a bounce.
With this tech, we can get the first Hungry Luma and the second star in Sea Slide. This gives us access to the secret star, which is easy enough, and star 3, which requires us to screw to get to the middle island. Well, that's the intended way at least. Instead, we have bees! By getting to this tree and using a precise flutter, we can barely make it to the middle island, giving us another star. We can get one more star from Bonefin Galaxy, and after grinding some star bits, we can get our last star from Snowcap Galaxy.
All that's left now is to travel to the center of the universe, and while this level is challenging, it's nothing we can't handle. That is until we get to the wall jumping section where we have to wall jump up 2 sections. And while 2-player wall kicks will work, that doesn't mean they're not difficult. And it doesn't help that this level also throws in a time limit. Nevertheless, this section is possible, leading us to Bowser. And 50 hits later, Bowser goes down. Meaning yes, it is possible to beat Mario Galaxy without jumping. And before I go, I just wanted to thank Mayro for being here. If you enjoy challenges like these, go ahead and check out her channel. A link will be in the description. But with that, I would like to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Stand Quagsire!